We're live on PM Express tonight. Tonight, a big conversation all of us have been having with some 28 days to go to this major referendum. It's a simple yes or no, but I wish it was that simple because it isn't. And the politics and the facts, because these two keywords have begun to really divide the front. We know that the December 17 referendum has in the last few days ignited some serious debate whether to vote yes or a no, dividing the country right in the middle. The proposal has been greeted with mixed reactions from a number of interest groups, and several of them. The National House of Chiefs, for example, was in the news recently. They themselves are split on the same question among the chiefs themselves. We know that some are calling on Ghanaians among the chiefs to completely reject the December 17 referendum. Again, that is not as simple, because some chiefs seem to be themselves not in agreement with that particular position adopted in a statement and signed by the president and the vice. We've heard the president of the Eastern Regional House of Chiefs this weekend also rejecting this position of the national body. That is an example of the division I refer to. Now, and he claims that the standing committee of the National House of Chiefs has no record of deliberations of this particular matter, and so the National House of Chiefs cannot issue that statement without consultations with the rest of the House. Now, on a session, the president of the National House of Chiefs, Togbe Afede, has described as dishonest and wanton mischief. So even among the chiefs who are expected to play a central role in this going forward, there isn't agreement on this subject. And then comes the politics, the partisanship, I guess. And the NDC and MPP again are divided on this. While the ruling MPP is asking their followers to vote a massive yes, the NDC is campaigning for the very opposite of that. And this is very recent. Just as last week, the NDC have been explaining that the yes vote will further polarize a nation, particularly local communities along the lines of NDC and MPP. And I think that is a bad thing to do. In the press conference that they called last week on the matter, what is the NPP's position on this? Today, they took a swipe at the NDC for what it describes as a breach of faith regarding this particular matter, because they believe consensus has been built on this and the NDC is simply backtracking for political purposes. The NPP wants a yes in the referendum, the NDC wants a no. The big question is, can the nation get a referendum with a 10 out of 40 and a 75% saying yes if the two parties are not in agreement? It's a big question we'll try and find out from my guest tonight. Civil society groups, IDEC, NCCE, among a few groups campaigning for a yes vote. Would they succeed without the two main parties agreeing on the key question? Now, they explain that the process will deepen decentralization process by giving citizens a chance to decide on the amendment of the Constitution. The facts, the referendum, and this is very important, pay attention to this because this is where the confusion had been. The referendum seeks to amend Article 55(3). All that does is to simply ask, should political parties be part of local level elections? That's what 55(3) is, and that's what the referendum is on, because on this, as it is in the Constitution right now, political parties are excluded from the process at that level. But if it's amended and you say yes, they get to be participate in the elections there. But then there's also the 243, which essentially gives the president the power to appoint the MMDCEs, of course, with the approval of members of the assembly. If this is amendment, this is not entrenched. If this is amended in Parliament, then that opens up that space, MMDCE's space for election. Okay, so the question really for December is, should that election happen on partisan lines or should it be on individual merit as it is right now? Some say even that is hypocritical because the parties are already there. Central question tonight, how do we separate the politics then from the facts? I have two individuals who understand this better than I do and who help us all break this down. Stay with us here on PM Express. You're live on PM Express tonight. My guest in the studio is the Executive Director of the Center for Democratic Development Ghana, that is Professor H.K. Prempeh. Henry Kwesi Prempeh. In fact, it's today that I've got to know that the H is Henry, because everybody calls him HKP. Prof, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you
here
very much
on
for having
PM
me,
Express. Also joining us is Dr. Dominic Ayine. He's a former Deputy Attorney General. He's also the Member of Parliament for Bolgatanga East. I'm grateful, sir, for joining me on PM Express.
Thank you very much.
This is obviously a heated debate. It's tearing the country again right from the center. But I guess the more we explain, we get people both sides of the debate to explain, the more you get to appreciate this. And I'll start with an anecdotal evidence I got today. My mother-in-law and I were in the car listening to the same debate on radio. And then he says, but why are the NDC guys doing this? We want to go and vote for the thing in December. And then I explained to her that the December elections is simply about whether or not the party should be involved. They said, no. Then I don't want that. I don't want that anymore. That was my mother-in-law, an old woman who wanted to vote yes. And then he hears the explanation, says, no, Prof, that comes to you because your position is against what she expressed to me today. Immediately she heard that December 17, whether or not we should allow parties there, she said no. Just before then, she was so for yes. Immediately I explained, she said no. That is the argument against your position. What do you say to her, for example?
Well, first I think I'm happy that you took the opportunity to explain
yes.
what the referendum is really about. And I think there's a good deal of confusion, voter confusion about what's exactly on the ballot. Yeah. But even once you clarify, as you did in your mom's case, I think her reaction also speaks to a certain sentiment that is commonly shared. So, as I said in one of my social media posts today, if indeed the question on the ballot was, do you like the way political parties conduct business in this town or in this country? Or do you like the way political parties have behaved themselves in this Fourth Republic? If that was the question on the ballot, I think the answer for most of us would be almost a close to unanimous no.
No.
Right? That is not the question on the ballot. But I understand those who have turned that into the question on the ballot. So your mom's reaction when she says, no, I don't want parties, is expressing, I think, a very deeply felt and widely felt sentiment within the populace of a certain fatigue with political parties, a certain disappointment with the way in which our party politics has been conducted. This comes on the heels of Ayawaso, West Wagon, all of these things, right? They pile up and people get frustrated that we are there to do our business. And so far, your record has not been that good, both of you. So for many people, and they'll tell you frankly, this is an opportunity for them to tell the parties how they feel about them. So it has turned into a referendum about how we feel about the political parties. My position is simple. I have always seen, my general view about constitutions is the constitution is a problem-solving device. We use constitutions and constitutional provisions, and therefore amendments, to solve particular problems. What particular problem do I see we need to solve here? We have a problem in our politics that we have lamented, civil society, governance experts, citizens, of winner-take-all politics. Opposition opposes all the time politics. So the winner takes all, the loser opposes all the time. And so for me, that is one problem I've identified. And so I ask myself in this referendum, is this provision something that can contribute to remedy that problem? I'm looking at this purely in terms of solving a particular problem in our governance system. So I see, well, fine, why not? What will happen if we allow parties to participate in the election of district assembly members, including once 243 becomes the law, including MMDCs? what will happen is that if your party were to win the national elections and therefore control power in Accra, specifically executive power, say, and in our elections these days, the margins are closed. So you win 51-49. That entitles you, under the current system, to control every single power in the land, locally and nationally, to make all appointments, to control distribution of all resources. And my position is, if we have an opportunity that is saying, okay, now, instead of that model of governance, what if in the same election where you won 51-49, your opponents in certain constituencies in the country which are considered their strongholds, they fared much better than you. They got almost 80%, sometimes even 90, 70, whatever. Why is it so wrong to say that in those places where they outperformed you, we give them an opportunity through local elections to also be able to elect an MMDC that belongs to their party? That then means that at any one time in the country, you have the main parties are both involved in governance. One party may be running the national government, but the other party has sufficient presence across the country that they are also running certain local communities in cooperation, because to do it well, you have to cooperate with the national. So the problems we're having about parties taking entrenched positions, parties not cooperating, parties just following party lines, this is one way.
Because you'll be forced to cooperate.
Absolutely, there's no way.
The local and the center.
The local and the center will cooperate because you have an opposition party at the local level, you have a central government, and they're working together. Besides, you now have an opposition party that is not just going to be fixated all the time on opposing for opposition's sake. Because for the 4 years under our current system, when you're out of power, you have nothing to do but to oppose. But under the new vision, if that were to prevail, you would have a situation where an opposition party would be busy also participating in governance in many places in the country where we could judge their performance. So when you're in opposition, we are going to judge you not just by how many press conferences you have and how many things you're able to say on PM Express or Newsfile, but on how you are governing those places where you are running the MMC. So this is, for me, one way to decongest power from Accra, one way to have to tame this winner takes all, loser just opposes politics. So that's why I see it as a problem-solving device. I see the problem. Does this help to contribute to the solution? Yes. In my analysis, yes. And therefore, I welcome it. There are other reasons, but this is one key reason in my view why this is a good idea.
Doc, where do you stand on this question? Or what do you make of the position as expressed by Prof? What's yours?
Well, I agree with Prof on one thing, which is that principally the Constitution is a problem-solving device, just like any piece of legislation. As we always say, the Constitution is a living document. A living document in the sense that, it is tailored to solve the problems of the time. And if those, at some point in time, the Constitution is seen to, is not solving those problems, it will have to be amended in order to be able to, efficiently perform its function as a problem-solving device. But I would want to focus on the problem that has been aptly identified by Prof, which is the winner-takes-all, problem in our democracy. Now, Prof presupposes that when you have the opposition taking part in local governance, for instance, in certain districts where the opposition has, a majority, and then they elect the chief executive of that district or that municipality or metropolitan authority, then it should be possible for the opposition to cooperate with the center in order to solve the winner-takes-all problem. Yeah. But I believe what Prof has assumed away is that there will be a resource transfer problem, all right, because all the resources are concentrated at the center. And as far as the constitutional arrangement is concerned, you will now have the 5% minimum of the DACF, that is the District Assembly Common Fund, being the only constitutional entitlement to resources that may be transferred from the center.
And we know that now. And we know now that even that 5% doesn't go sometimes.
Well, it doesn't go sometimes, and I'll be the first to tell you, because I took a matter, to the Supreme Court representing Honorable Kodo, the MP for Ho Central, and the Supreme Court has given a ruling. As we speak now, we are scrutinizing the budget to find out whether or not they have complied. All right. Okay. So if you have a situation where it is only the Assembly Common Fund, that 5%, which is the constitutional entitlement of a district that has a majority, or that has an elected representative of the opposition, okay, then that chief executive is going to be saddled with a situation where the only thing that comes to him, okay, maybe the 5% DACF, and then the discretionary transfers may be withheld by the president in order to starve that district of resources and then make him unpopular so that the president's party can win the next election. So it is more complicated than, Prof has put it. That is not to, take away the, argument, okay, the persuasiveness of the argument that Prof has made, that if we, look at the Constitution closely, and we see that it is not solving the problems of the country, it is high time that we looked, we amended it in order for it to accord with, the dictates of the times. But there's one thing, Evans, that I want to underscore. You see, what is happening now, we have a bifurcated system of democracy under the Constitution. We have a multi-party democracy at the top, where the president and the MPs are elected along partisan lines, okay? And then a non-partisan system at the bottom, okay, where assemblymen, all right, are elected along non-partisan lines, and then, of course, unit committee members and so on are all, elected along non-partisan lines. And then you have a district chief executive who is appointed by the president, okay, or with the confirmation of 2/3 of the members of the assembly. All right. Now, what 55(3), the proposed amendment, seeks to do is to abolish this bifurcation and allow an all-out partisan, multi-party democracy. All right. Now the question is, what is wrong with that? Because at the end of the day, all right, democracy is about factions, especially multi-party liberal democracy. It's about factions, all right? And so there is nothing inherently wrong with partisanship. The problem, and I think that is what was aptly identified by your mother-in-law. Yeah. Okay. All right. Even though I don't know her background, she may not be a political scientist or a constitutional lawyer, but she does understand that since 1992, okay, we've run a multi-party system of democracy, and I would be the first to say that Ghanaians are getting sick and tired of the conduct of the parties, all right? Instead of being vehicles for generating ideas, competing ideas about alternative visions of our society, we have reduced ourselves, into vehicles for acrimony, for
violence,
violence, as Prof has pointed out, Ayawasu West, Wagon, and so on, and those are the things that are not enduring and endearing partisanship to the Ghanaian, populace as in general. Okay, so instead of us to have a marketplace of ideas, that will enrich the way we govern the country, we have fallen short of that, and we have reduced ourselves, to vehicles for, violence and patronage and so on and so forth. So I believe that the problem is not, necessarily with just having parties at the local level, but how do you curb the problems that, attend party politics, okay, at the national level that have been aptly identified by the populace, and then also how do you ensure that that is minimized or eliminated together at the local level if you introduce partisanship.
Okay.
All right.
I want to bring that question is key. How do you do that? Your primary position is it will deal with a specific problem, winner takes all. But there is this other problem that the fear is it might exacerbate. As in, we might then get vigilantism now, possibly at the local level elections.
But where do you think the vigilantism comes from? There is nothing, nobody lives in a place called national, right? The national is an aggregation of the local. We all live in local places. Okay, so this bifurcation between national and local is a false distinction, right? Elections take place locally. My good friend Dominic was elected, is a national politician, but he's elected locally. The votes for the president are cast locally. Vigilantism takes place locally. All of these things, all the things that we are talking about as ailing our politics, take place locally. So it is not now that national problems are going to be visited on local communities.
The argument is already happening.
The problems of politics are problems also of local politics. Much of what, at the national level, a lot more of what we see, maybe the press conferences take place in Accra, but Accra is also somebody's local area. Right? Maybe the press conference, the parliament is Accra, so those things take place here. But the kinds of things we're talking about, the kinds of partisanship we're talking about, are local phenomena. Right? Whether you're talking about vigilante groups or where do they live? They live locally. So I think, one, we have to recognize that. I think, secondly, if I had my own preference, seriously, but I don't want to make that kind of a distinction. If I had my own preference, I would not really be so bothered about electing assembly members and unit committee members on a non-party basis, right? But the way we have written our constitution, 55.3 and 248 and all of those provisions, it's basically the district assembly, the district chief executive is a member of the assembly, and once we make a rule about 55.3, unless we tweak it in some other future some way, it applies to all those elections at one time. I'm more interested in the MMDC election because really it is the concentration of executive power, especially, that I am concerned with. And you get that through the MMDCE system than through unit committees and assemblymen. But even that, so now we know, right? Today, my good friend, Professor Asari, visited me at the office and we took a stroll in my neighborhood,
I saw the pictures.
CDD neighborhood. And lo and behold, were these, this is a month to election, local assembly elections, and there were these posters. And so we just tried to have fun with it. We took pictures, of the various posters. And you don't have to, unless you are just coming from Mars, you don't have to be a rocket scientist
to know
who is the NDC candidate or who are the NDC candidates and who are the NDP candidates, right? So it's a fiction. The local people know it's a fiction. And I think what it does is that it actually, if there are really parties behind these candidates, and that's my position, if there are party interests behind these candidates, and we are not transparent about it, then we also miss an opportunity to assign responsibility and accountability appropriately for how our local spaces and our local communities are governed. So if you have put this thing there pretending you are an independent or a non-party candidate, and in fact you have been put there by the NPP or by the NDC, why are citizens and voters not entitled to know who are the powers behind you?
What difference would that make?
It makes a lot of difference in terms of assigning accountability and responsibility for your performance. If indeed you are just a surrogate for a party.
However, Prof, as it is right now, if we don't change anything, individuals will run on their own merit. Citizens can still hold those individuals
accountable.
Yes, but if these are people who are actually surrogates, you think they're running on the individual, and they currently running on the individual merit. That's what they tell you.
How will the accountability manifest?
You can take it on the party if indeed they are underperforming. If it's an individual, you can only take it on the individual. But if it's a party behind the person, your vote, you can use your vote to express your disapproval of that behavior.
But that comes to my follow-up question. My follow-up question will be, if there's an individual, that same ultimate manifestation will apply to that individual in the next elections.
Yes.
You sack him.
No, but it's a very simple. I mean, but that it's different if indeed, and these are empirical, factual matters, right? It's different if indeed these are not individuals standing on their own merit, but they have powers behind them. You also should not discount the fact that under our arrangement, district elections are held apart, some period apart from our general elections. Yeah. So, as I envision it, we are going to have elections almost like a year to, it's like a midterm election. The US, they have this thing called midterm elections. In the middle of a presidential term, members of Congress are elected, right? Now, that is an interesting model because if we start this practice where we are electing MMDCs on a party basis, assemblies on a party basis, and you are in the middle of your term as a party in government, and people are dissatisfied with your performance, it also offers citizens an opportunity locally
to punish you.
Absolutely, to register their disapproval of the way you're running the country. Because it's a fixed term, in a parliamentary system, these things are fluid, so things can happen even in your term. In a fixed presidential term, this cannot happen. But once we have district elections on party basis that serve as a midterm election of sorts, it becomes another referendum halfway in your term for citizens to also deliver you a message. These are all additional layers of accountability that we miss when we just say individuals should just stand in their individual capacity when we know it's a fiction. Now, what is so good about all of us allowing this deception and this dishonesty to persist? It's not illegal. I mean, when I saw the picture, people are saying, oh, well, but what you are saying is that if there is corruption and you can't do something about it, then you should legalize it. No, the truth is that the people who are in those posters and the colors, there's nothing they have done that is illegal. Corruption is illegal, robbery is illegal, all those other things are illegal, right? So it's not a simple law enforcement problem saying, oh, somebody told me, but go and, CDD should go and report them to the police. I said, what have they done? The law doesn't prescribe the use of any particular color, nor does it prescribe the use of any particular color. So they're actually within their right. They are not being sponsored openly by a party. They are just using colors.
Let me bring Doc in.
So yes. But I think the transparency is important. It is important. I would prefer a situation where I know that this is the slate of candidates. This is NDC, this is NPP, this is a third party, this is independent. If I want to cast my vote for an independent, I am free to cast my vote for an independent. If I want to cast my vote for a third party, I am free to do so. And if I want to cast my vote for MPP and DC, I'm also free to do so. I want that transparency for the voter so they know who they are choosing. I don't like this kind of system where people lie about who they are and then you have to...
Doc, that's a big question, isn't it? That this is happening in the shadows, sometimes even overtly, but of course without NDC and NPP. The only thing missing there is NDC and NPP on the poster. But everything else is political. So if that is happening, we all agree. You disagree with that, by the way, that is happening.
Well, okay, let me say this.
Why don't you just make it open so we can now hold them their feet to the fire?
What the Prof has described reminds me of Professor Gordon Woodman's analogy between the lawyer's law and then the sociologist's law. So the lawyer's law is what is on the statute books now, 55(3), all right, and 48, and so on. But maybe, and just maybe, the sociologist's law is what he has described, that implicitly or behind the scenes, okay, people are running along partisan lines, being supported, indirectly by parties, okay, identifying themselves within their communities with certain parties that are popular within those communities and so on and so forth, okay. But the question is whether that is sufficient basis for saying that we should introduce partisan politics at the local, at the local level. The reason is simply because, yes, and I agree with Prof that I ran in Bolga East, which is a local space, on the ticket of the NDC against an MPP candidate, all right? So at that local level, you have MPs like myself galvanizing votes along party lines, all right? But when you take electoral areas, especially those that are, that have multi-ethnic, groups, okay, the election of assemblymen along partisan lines introduces another dimension that doesn't exist when you are dealing with the MP.
What is that?
Okay, so for instance, in an electoral area, in my electoral areas, in Bolga East, all right, we have sections. Sometimes you would have a candidate who is an MPP candidate, all right, so-called, not overtly, right, winning in a heavily NDC area because his section happens to have the highest number of, eligible voters, all right. Now, what this means is that in that section, okay, they do not care about party. What they care about is having somebody that they can trust representing their interests. Yeah. Okay. Now, if you make it partisan, what it will mean is that the registered NDC members in this area will be looking at the party colors and at the election, and not just the fact that they have somebody that they can trust, that they can also hold accountable in their community for whatever is happening at the local level, at the assembly. Okay, so I think Prof may be right about transparency, but we also need to take account of the local dynamics, okay, at the local level, which are, really very different from those that apply when it comes to the election of persons, like me, who are running on the ticket of a national party, and they often tie the MP to the presidential candidate. All right. So, for instance, they would say if he is elected, right, he has access to the president. That is, if his presidential candidate is elected, for him to be able to bring development to us. So they are not going to consider the other factors that they would otherwise have been considering if, I were just a purely local candidate.
But we don't.
So there's a difference.
I think, but we don't know that. You see, the part of what we're debating is also, a lot of it is speculative, right? We are making assumptions about voter behavior, giving certain incentives, right? And that's all fair on both sides, because that's how you have to unfold this debate, because some of the things we're talking about, we have never tried before. Okay, but I remember that when the Fourth Republic began, right, there were certain parties that were locally strong, nationally weak. They began winning
like the PNC,
right? In the initial stages of the Fourth Republic, in the first few elections, these parties that are locally or regionally strong but nationally weak had representation even in parliament. They managed to win some local areas. I say that if we had started the election of MNDCs on party lines in 1993, 1992, 1996, those parties that have now essentially become almost electorally extinct would have controlled certain metros and municipalities because they had local support. That would have been a basis for them to even build their national presence. They could elect MPs, they would have a record to show locally for what they have done, and those of us who clamor for third party, third force, independent,
to break the duopoly,
that's part of the process. Now, over time, because they are such a marginal opposition, right, and worse than the main opposition, because if the main opposition has nothing to do when they're in opposition, imagine what these other third parties do. Nothing at all. They've all been essentially become electorally extinct. I think that if we had begun, I can speculate fairly, that if we had begun the Fourth Republic with the election of MMDs on party basis, those parties that are locally strong, nationally weak, would have survived, would have gotten support locally, they would have had a place to govern, to show their results, because that's how you survive. You produce results. You see, so if
but,
you
but
are,
Prof, that would have also depended very much. Sorry to cut in,
Sure,
but that would
sure,
have
that's
depended
fine,
very
Prof.
much,
That's fine.
you know, on the autonomy, you know, of the
Precisely.
the districts,
I was going to come
the
to that, right?
municipalities, and the metropolitan areas.
Precisely, right?
You-
so
yeah.
the point,
Autonomy from
the point Dominic
From the
made,
center.
the center.
The
Yes.
point Dominic made, maybe 3 arguments prior, right? It's an important one. Nobody, I don't think...
About the resources.
Absolutely. I don't think anybody, I mean, and I have said it, that this is not a silver bullet, right? This electing MMDCs, assemblies on a party basis will not solve all of the problems that ail decentralization in local government. I think that the huge disproportion between the resources in the center and the resources that we send down locally, which is where people live their real lives, is almost criminal. I mean, the Constitution only states a minimum, says 5%. In practice, you will tell me, I don't know how much gets there, but it's not a whole lot. Accra still holds the disproportionate amount of resources. So I think alongside this, right, this is a good proposal in my view. It is not a perfect one. But we should not, as I keep saying, make the perfect the enemy of the good, right? This is good enough for now, but it has to come with a package of other reforms.
Okay.
Among them, a real national conversation about the resources. Where should we put resources between center and local?
But you've raised a very important point that goes to the core of the NDC argument, which is that because of the package he has to come with, and they say that package is so missing from this, and they don't trust that the NDC with the MPP with the majority in parliament post the referendum, if they support them together, yes, will agree to bring in the rest of the package needed to make this meaningful.
Why not,
And then apart from that, there's also the piecemeal approach, you know, to the amendments that were brought to Parliament,
including from dealing with the 30%,
right?
The appointment of the residents' powers.
So transformation.
I want you to state that. Don't know we can deal with it. Because it's a fundamental point.
No, it's fundamental in the sense that if you have a situation where you are bringing an amendment to 243, all right, and then you are leaving.
I like always when it's about 243, because most of our listeners won't know. 243 amendment to the president's
power to appoint MMDCs,
yes,
right? And then you leave untouched, right? The president's power, okay, to what do you call it?
Appoint to the assembly.
Yeah, no, not the appoint to that. No, for instance, the president's power to even remove,
to dismiss,
to dismiss. All right. Then you haven't gone as far. I mean, enough as is necessary in order to really make it more. Democratic. And then also, if you are looking at 55, all right, Article 55, which deals with the the ability of political parties to sponsor candidates. All right. And you leave Article 243, all right, which bans, assemblymen from campaigning or standing on the ticket of political parties. You haven't done, you haven't done anything. I mean, you haven't gone far enough. So what we were saying, or what we are saying is that, okay, there should have been a holistic attempt, all right, to amend the, Article 243 on the president's power of appointment, together with the president's, power to dismiss. All right, and then also in tandem with the details of 55.3, relating to political party sponsorship of, candidates at the local level, you would have needed also to amend 248, which deals with the, the ability of assemblymen and women to run, along political party lines. Okay, so the package, I think, was not, properly brought to Parliament in order to, get the buy-in of the minority. And that is how come that
question to you before I come to
yes.
This, what you NDC proposes, which you just stated, can't it be dealt with post?
Of course it can.
Post the referendum, because these are simple amendments that Parliament can do by itself.
Absolutely.
Well,
all of them are not entrenched.
All of them
okay.
are entrenched.
First of all.
So allow this to go and then fix that problem.
First of all, I think the fundamental position of the NDC is that we do not want partisanship at the local level. Despite all the nice things that Prof has said about about the role of parties and so on, and I myself, I do agree, okay, that, you know, when you have parties canvassing for votes and so on, and especially if they are doing it rightly, you can have competing ideas about how you can you govern a society. And so those things are there. But we have, as a country, seen a lot of very bad things happening with political parties.
So you just
and
don't trust the MPP, that's what you're saying?
Well,
That
it is not, no, I don't.
bring the rest of the package if you...
I think he doesn't trust himself.
Well, that is not.
As a politician.
How could he say something like that as a party politician, right? I mean, he has to trust him. I trust Dominic, right? I trust him, and I think it's. You see, so he makes 2 points that are important, right? I think the point about local parties, part of the argument that we also bring to the table is that we actually need to build the local parties so that they are more than just election machines. Local parties that have development work to do, that have spaces to govern, will act fundamentally differently from local parties that are only activated when national elections come to get elected. So when you have work to do to govern your locality, when you win power locally as a party, it forces you towards becoming a more programmatic party, a party that actually develops programs and ideas for the local space, right? So that is also, the party building element of this must also not be forgotten. There is that part of that too, that electing parties, electing assemblies and MMDCs on a party basis compels local parties to prioritize programs and development instead of just remaining clientelist election machines at the behest of national elites who come only every 4 years when there's an election to be prosecuted. Right? So that's also part of the argument. The issue about this not being done in a big bang, transformation doesn't always have to come in a big bang. It could be incremental. In fact, I know that there's agreement in principle among or between the parties in parliament that amending 243 is necessary but not sufficient. But it is the basic, it's the beginning. The provision that says the president must appoint all MMDCEs, must nominate and appoint subject to that, is what opens up the space. So once you take that out, once you have bipartisan consensus on that and it passes, then thankfully the next MMDC election will not occur until somewhere 2021 or thereabouts. So there's yet time to now sit down and say, okay, now we have cleared this big first hurdle about which there's consensus. Those other ones, now let us pick them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, put them together, and in the space that we have between now and 2021, let us pass another consolidated bill taking care of all of those complementary amendments and consequential amendments. Because about those ones, there is yet not consensus. So what you have, the bird in hand, is what you must deal with now and pass it. So for example, on the provision about 1/3, everybody agrees that you cannot have a system where you elect MMDs on a party basis and the president retains this power to appoint 1/3. It dilutes the will of the people at the local level. There are a number of proposals floating around, no consensus yet. My own preference, for example, would be some kind of proportional representation so that depending on how the votes are distributed locally, we can say, you know, you got 60% here, so of the 1/3, you get to appoint your 60%. The other, you know, so there are different formulations.
But will the incumbent president give up the power after they backed him to get his?
But if they don't do that, right? If you know the beauty about constitutional amendments is that there's a built-in consensus, right? When the Constitution tells you that you need 2/3, the only time 2/3 has happened is in the 1993 to 1996 Parliament, which the MPP boycotted. That is the only time one party has had full 2/3 to change the Constitution. It has not been repeated, which means that implicitly the framers of the Constitution are telling us that to do constitutional amendment, you need bipartisanship. So if the MPP says, oh, we have gotten our 243, then NDC can block. There are a number of other things you have to change to make 243 work, right? If you don't change that, a number of they can just make sure that it doesn't work, right? Because the power to dismiss is still there. This is there. 248 is still there. So that is where
but that all benefits the incumbent, by the way. The power to dismiss, if it still remains,
yes, but
the incumbent still benefits.
But if you amend 55,
but that would be that would be incongruous.
Exactly.
To have the
citizens
elect and for the president to remove. I mean, it certainly
you cannot implement it, and not even that. Even currently, the assembly can by 2/3 remove or recall. Do you keep that too? After the citizens have elected, you allow the assembly to use their 2/3. So there are a lot of things that will be incongruous, right? Including even after 55-3, even if 55-3 passes, you still have to deal with 248, which is almost a carbon copy of 55-3, but 55-3 by itself cannot remove 248. It has to be passed separately in Parliament. So the minority still has a lot of cards to play.
Yeah.
You cannot just say because my position is the bird in hand is worth two in the bush. There is consensus on this one. You go forward and pass it now, lock it in, and I'll come and sit back and say, okay, brethren, sisterin, let us now look at consequential and complementary amendments, take them all on board in one bill, boom, we're done.
I want to take a break. When I return, I'll deal with the part of this that it goes to the practicality of what is going to happen on December 17. We have 28 days to go, to be very precise. Where we are now without the NDC, what is a possibility that 17th December will happen, and will happen in a way that will deliver a vote that, I guess, meets your expectation? And what should happen between now and then? Is this dead in the water? There are NPP folks, senior men, who believe, well, if the NDC is out, we can get 40% turnout. We definitely cannot get 75% to vote yes. And so let's kill the parliamentary amendment too. We'll try and examine those real hard ones as well. So what should happen now in reality? In 28 days before the 17th, and MPP, by the way, today asked the NDC, and I haven't heard that in a while, appealing to them to come back to the table. Well, that tells you how much is at stake here. When we return, we'll examine those questions from the perspective of the two gentlemen. I still want to hear Dr. Ayine's view on a yes or no. He hasn't given me his position on that. He's hedging on that question. I'll see if he can give me a yes or no on where he stands on it. Stay with us on PM Express. So live on PM Express, and my guest in the studio is Dr. Dominic Ayine. Is a former Deputy Attorney General. He is also member of Parliament for Bolgatanga East. Also with me is Executive Director of the Center for Democratic Development, Ghana, Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh. And of course, this is a very not only interesting, but an absolutely essential conversation to have. And so we're just going to extend the time slightly, just by 10 minutes. So we can exhaust this other part of the conversation, which goes to, right now, we are where we are. In spite of all the arguments you've heard on the show, we are where we are. How do we fix it before December 17? Let me come, on that note, let me come to you, Dr. Ayine.
Yes.
Because, Doc, the NDC threw in this spanner last week and then got us to a point where nobody's sure anymore. Until last week, a lot of people were sure this was smooth sailing. We are where we are, 28 days to go. The party says vote no or campaign for a no. Your leader was on our program this morning, and he says that, well, those who are not towing the line, three-line whip, you either do or face sanctions. Where do we go from here to solve this political gridlock on this matter? What's your proposal on that?
Well, I think that as we stand now, there's a need for some kind of inter-party consensus going forward. So far, I am not aware of any consultation at the level of the two parties that has taken place in order to arrive at some consensus regarding the way forward. I think the parties took their respective positions. In our case, our position is reflected in the report of the Constitution Review, a commission, which was established by Professor Mills. And of course, we were in the course of implementing the recommendations of the commission when we lost power. The MPP came in with its own manifesto promise to ensure the election of MMDCs, okay, and that is what they are pushing through now with respect to the proposal to amend the non-entrenched provisions in Parliament, and then also to take 55(3) dealing with, you know, the ability of political parties to sponsor candidates at the local level, you know, to a referendum. So I think we're in our self-contained, you know, jurisdictions, if I may put it so, without talking to each other regarding such an important national matter, you know. And
the consensus was built on Parliament.
I don't think that it is sufficient to say that the consensus should be built in Parliament, okay, because we are running a presidential system of government. The president is a key player, you know, in this exercise. This is not a proposal that is coming from Parliament. It is actually a proposal that's coming to Parliament, all right? So leadership of Parliament, yes, can consult and talk. But remember that the parties, both the MPP and the NDC, outside of Parliament, are also key stakeholders, yeah, all right? And to be honest with you, when it comes to convincing you know, card-bearing members or party followers and so on, the parties do a better job, right, through their structures, absolutely, than we, the members of Parliament, can do. All right. Now we are faced with a situation where a three-line whip, you know, system has been invoked. Mm-hmm. All right, and we have all been, you know, told to toe the line.
Are you following the line?
Of course, yes.
Okay, because not all of you are, because Ras Mubarak tonight clearly.
Oh yes, I am.
You listened to him. He
right.
was,
you know,
absolutely
despite
clear he cannot go the party line.
Yeah, I listened to Ras, and I had, you know, one-on-one discussions with him. Okay. All right. You know, I'm not totally against partisanship, and you know, all the very good points, excellent points that Prof has made, okay, are points that I think I don't disagree with. Okay. The only thing is that from our position as a party, from where we sit, we think that the negatives, you know, are more than the positives articulated, you know, by Prof now. Because from the practical reality on the ground, so okay, there's so much.
Government? Are you now for union government? Or? The negatives outweigh the positives. So
that is in relation. Okay. I think in relation to the local level,
and having partisan politics at that level, So direct question: are you for then a yes or a no?
I am for a no.
Okay, that's a party.
I'm towing the party's line.
When the party decides that they are for yes, he will be for a yes.
But it's a very important point to answer, actually.
Yes.
Because if the party changes your mind,
absolutely,
you would follow in line too.
But he told you there's a three-line
whip. That, you know, that has been involved.
Are you saying that without the three-line whip, you wouldn't have?
If we were told, all right, if we were told that the three-line whip is not being invoked, I am more inclined, okay, and now speaking as a citizen, I am more inclined towards the introduction of partisanship at the local level, okay, all right, because as I said, using the analogy of the lawyer's law and the sociologist's law, all right, it is currently the sociologist's law that is prevailing on the ground. Okay, but I do agree with my party's identification of all those problems that will come with the introduction of partisanship at the local level.
You say that if they didn't issue a three-line whip, you would have gone for parties. You're there representing your people, fundamentally, not your party.
Well, I am representing my people on the ticket of the National Democratic Congress.
But your people sent you there, not the NDC.
Well, yes, my people sent me there and not the NDC, right? But the NDC is the party on whose ticket my people elected me. They first identified with the NDC before identifying with me.
Does your position now, in agreement with the NDC, agree with the position of your people?
I have no empirical basis to say yes or no. I haven't conducted any poll.
Shouldn't you find out first? Because the power originates from the power they gave you. Yes. Originates from there before you say
all power emanates from the people. You know, go to Article 1 of the Constitution.
Even easier. Yes. So why didn't you do that before you told the party line?
That's a bit. That's a no. That's
I
a.
presented myself. I want to be mean
yes,
to you.
No,
but
don't worry. Don't worry about that. It's important. If I had the resources and the means, you know, to do some polling in my constituency prior to,
we can do it.
yeah, prior to the party's, position, which was announced to the entire country. Okay, I would have been able to say that the people of Bolga East do support either a yes or a no vote, and because I am their representative, and as their representative, I have to act in their best interest. I am, going to go with my people. I would have done so. Okay, but as things stand now, I do not have any empirical basis to say what my people, think. All right.
Here's an empirical basis.
Yes.
Today, the Local Government Institute have done a poll,
right,
which they published today. More than 70% of Ghanaians, and this is projecting to the population, say yes.
Okay. How many people were surveyed in Bolga East?
I don't know.
Okay.
But this,
countrywide,
polls work.
And countrywide, how many people were surveyed?
I can pull out the methodology for you.
Okay.
But I'm just stating the basic point.
Yeah.
That more than 70% said yes. NDC is, if you take that poll to be what it is, scientific, and this is local government issue we're talking about here, NDC is on the wrong side of public opinion.
Well, look, let me tell you something. Okay. As I said earlier on, okay, sovereignty resides in the people of Ghana. Okay. And we all draw our power from the sovereign people of this country. If the majority of the people of this country say they want the introduction of partisan politics at the local level, I'm sure the National Democratic Congress will not stand in the way of the majority of the people of this country. Okay. In fact, it will be wise for us not to do so, because we can incur the wrath of the people and stay in opposition forever. Okay, so for me, if there is credible evidence, of support, overwhelming support for the introduction of partisan politics at the local level, I don't think that my party will, stand in the way. And I believe that the only credible evidence that we have is through the mechanism of voting. Okay, of course, surveys may come, and depending on their predictive value, you can say that 70–60% say they are going to vote, yes. All right, but on polling day, okay, will you get those numbers voting yes? It may turn out that on polling day, the no vote will win, and if it does, then my party will be on the right side of history. And it is going to be the MPP that will be on the wrong side of history.
Prof.
So,
yeah, Prof, you do the polls, you do the research. What does the research say? If you've done anything recently in the past on this, and I know Afrobarometer had done a few bit on this question generally. What is the feedback?
I think we did a poll on the issue of the voting for MMDCs in 2017 Afrobarometer. And that showed a substantial majority, I think 69%,
okay,
in favor of electing MMDCs. On the question of whether you would want to elect on party basis, there was much lower support for that. Actually, it was almost like 50, close to 49, not a majority. But that is before the issue had become topical, before there was a debate about it, before there is an exchange of ideas about it, But I think that I understand my friend Dominic's dilemma, and I empathize with him. The point I think though is that when you look at when the Constitution tells you that you need 75% public approval or voters' approval before a proposed amendment to a particular clause in the Constitution, in this case the entrenched clause, can pass, what the framers are essentially telling you is that you need bipartisanship, or you need multipartisanship. So I completely agree with him that this is not something you can pursue, whether or not it's in your manifesto or not. It is not something you can pursue as a one-party project. So clearly, the Constitution contemplates that the parties, not just in Parliament, but also the parties outside Parliament, because this is not a parliamentary thing, will all work together and shepherd this to a successful end. So in a sense, what we are faced with now, I think, represents a failure of bipartisanship in the system. But I also think that, you know, something that I'm learning from my friend Dominic also unsettles me a bit, because we have a presidential system, but it appears that on the parliamentary side, we are practicing a Westminster system, where the party, right, in the Westminster system, the reason parties are that strong and have that whip on the conscience of their members of parliament is that there is always a risk that if you lose on a vote of no confidence, or that you're out of power, and there'll be new elections. So your term is actually fluid, it's not fixed. It is not expected that when you operate a presidential system, that the parties will have that kind of a hold on the conscience of their members in parliament. So the idea that even if you were otherwise inclined to vote yes or to vote no in the case of the NPP, that your party would whip you in line and therefore let you vote according to their preference, is a bit, it's not the kind of system that I think, and it also speaks to, again, another source of the partisanship, right? So here you are, there are members of parliament who want to deal, who are willing to deal and make deals with each other for this thing to work. And we are talking about partisanship. And I think we have just identified one of the sources of the partisanship is a system where the party really just prevents its members from conscience voting. And again, as we're talking about sources of partisanship and how to cure them, I think maybe we'll put that on the table as one of the problems. But I think we've reached a stalemate in a sense. Of course, and on every election ballot, there are two issues, a referendum ballot. No is as legitimate a vote as yes. I'm a Democrat, so I respect that, right? What I want is for us to come to that decision on the basis of open, honest dialogue and debate.
Has it been honest? Has the dialogue been honest?
I think that the NDC's last-minute flipping came as a surprise to many of us. My organization, CDD, has worked with IDEG and others to try to broker a certain understanding, and I was fully convinced that the NDC was on board. Actually, at some point I thought that they even felt more strongly about 55-3 than about.
When you say that, you mean NDC felt more strongly about having partisanship
because
at the local level?
I don't see why any of the parties would feel more or less strongly about this. There's nothing, if we elect MMDCs on a party basis, there's nothing in the history of the country or anything that tells me that the NPP must like it more than the NDC. They are each capable of winning elections in the country, nationally and locally. They each have their strongholds where it should be of some interest and benefit to them, even if they were to lose the national office, that they would run those places. So there's nothing between the two parties that suggests to me that one should like MMDC election on party basis more or less than the other, right? So in a sense, yes, I was actually surprised. But my sense is that, look, this is a bipartisan project. It will work only if it's a bipartisan. I've looked at the polls that have come out about, again, that surprises me a bit, right? I mean, maybe I'm sitting in Accra and I sit on social media too much, so I'm not really too connected to the people on the ground. But I do think that, all hope is not lost yet. There is yet time. There's yet time. There's yet time because when some of the issues that the NDC said were informed their no vote, it's not a categorical no vote the way I listen to that, right?
It's conditional.
It's almost like this is a no vote, not based. We haven't come to a no vote, some deep philosophical no vote, but it's actually it's a political strategic no vote. There are certain things that we think ought to be done.
So what needs to be done to fix the problem before 2017?
But that is what politics is about. Politics is the art of the possible. You sit down and you do deals.
Who must be willing to concede more?
I think both sides. I mean, I don't particularly see this. Look, if you go to the polls and this loses, I don't see it as an NPP loss or an NDC loss. It's a national referendum on an issue about which the country is divided. It was put to a vote.
Who must lead the process to sit and talk?
Government? I think government, sure. I think government should do that.
Should do
the outreach, absolutely.
Dominic says he's not aware of anything happening now that shows that. But you're encouraging government to do it.
Oh, why not? I mean, if you really feel strongly that this is in the national interest for 55-3 to pass, if you think that there is an opening, it is not an ideological position of the party, and that this is only a strategic or tactical no, and that with some outreach and bargaining, you could reach consensus on the issues they put on the table, unless they come up with something that's absolutely not, it's almost like starting as fresh, right? But if these things can be dealt with as consequential amendments, complementary amendments, and the like, then why not? Parties bargain. That's what parties are there for.
Again, with 28 days to go, you see that as a possibility that we can deal with this before then?
It's a possibility. I mean, these are,
What's your confidence level on that? Knowing how politics is playing.
Whether it's a probability, it's a possibility. It's probably not likely, but I'm disappointed by that prospect that it cannot happen at all. I mean, because really this is a national project. That's how I see it. I haven't come to any of these positions based on whether or not it will help Party B. I don't see any particular reason why this should help.
Quick questions as we wrap up. 40% turnout, 75% say yes. Without the NDC, and looks very likely that that's going to happen. Would that ever become a reality?
Ghanaians believe in miracles. They go to church a lot. They go to, they pray a lot. Maybe divine intervention.
Well, I don't know. Look, I think that this is, it's not open and shut, because we have, said we are going to campaign for no. It is possible that our supporters, will differ from us. Okay, that is an open possibility. And I agree with, Prof, that politics is the art of the possible, okay? And, from between now and voting day, maybe the two parties will begin to, come together to see whether or not there is some consensus that can be built. Maybe CDD should organize an inter-party dialogue on democracy and development, for us to be able to see whether or not we can build consensus.
Are you going to get in there?
Why not? We're already there. I mean, this is something that we...
on the back of where we are now.
Why not? We haven't disengaged. Okay. We are actually still, even as I speak, we are still making attempts with our partners, IDEC, on this matter, trying to actually broker an inter-party kind of understanding, right? So no, we haven't given up on this.
Okay, that's a fantastic note to bring the show to an end. and it's a very positive note going forward. And a lot of disagreements, but fantastic disagreements on both sides, trying to get you to appreciate all the arguments there is before you make a decision. And that's the only thing a good democracy does for its people. Give them the opportunity to appreciate all the arguments, so when you enter into the booth, you are informed on the decision you're going to make. And we're going to do a bit more of this. In fact, tomorrow, we have the minority and majority leaders both on the show as well.
Wow.
Continuing the same conversation, because we can't do this without Parliament. And so we want to get them in there. Remember, there is another amendment that only Parliament can do. In fact, that's the more important one, some even argue, the one that takes the president's power away to a point. And so tomorrow we'll have them on the show as we begin and continue to get you informed before December 17th. So thank you for joining us. My guest, Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh, he is Executive Director of the CDD, and Dr. Dominic. I'm grateful, gentlemen, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the
day. Wonderful. Thank you.
PM Express was brought to you by
Emirates. Fly better.